important for us to be working more closely on those financing avenues and really seeing how they can be channeled more towards achieving gender equitable results. We're in particular involved in the process leading up to the fourth high-level forum in Busan this year, and bringing in a lot of our work that we've been doing at country level on looking at domestic resources and their responsiveness towards gender equality. And more importantly, one of the new things that we are looking forward to engaging very closely with is developing more accountability within the UN system budgets, to really seeing how the UN is investing its budgets in a gender responsive way. We're working with various agencies who are developing gender markers, something along the lines of the OECD gender marker, with the limitations that exist within that, but also it's a good starting point that will allow us more closely to be monitoring financial investments.
Thank you. Maxine?
Thank you. Yes, a very interesting question. This about, well, there's two parts to your question. One is about cash transfers. What good things are there out there that we can sort of look at and see if it can be put into the programs that exist elsewhere? And the other is what were our recommendations out of this research? The lessons learned, I think, the case I know best is the Oportunidades case in Mexico. And there were 4 things there that I think were valuable, that accounts for the fact that they have achieved better results than others. One is that they have an incentive program to give more resources, or they did when it was necessary, to families with girls to incentivize their getting into education. That, I think, is a lesson that could be used elsewhere because of the resistance to releasing girls into education for a variety of reasons is greater. So that was one lesson, and that worked very well. It actually has led to the ending of the gender gap in education in Mexico. The second point is that they work quite closely with women's organizations, and specialists, both at design and implementation stage, so that they could begin to incorporate more discussion and more elements that were kind of more gender sensitive. Thirdly, they actually incorporated mechanisms that could evaluate some of the kind of gender issues. And fourthly, they carried out large-scale qualitative work done by Mercedes González de la Rocha, which did actually show some of the ways in which the programs are working well or working badly in relation to women. So those were 4 things. I think in terms of I won't go through all we have 9 recommendations, so I'll just pick out a couple. I mean, one is the fact of trying to get what governments already have signed up to mainstreamed across departments and ministries. I mean, that's really important. It's not that always the political will isn't there. It's often there, but there just is no joined-upness about these gender issues. Secondly, there are questions of sustainability, and here I think the challenge would be to hook up these programs much more with development initiatives. How many times do you see poor women, not being trained to be able to kind of, make use of the resources that they have, the land that they have, and so on and so forth. So it's a development issue, and if one could sort of get these things much more hooked up with what's going on, again with other ministries, other developments, even in terms of increasing the fertility of their subsistence plots or whatever it might be, that would be another important finding. And thirdly, this question of transforming gender relations. I mean, one of the things that is missing from these programs is any involvement at all with men. I mean, men are simply left out of the calculus. It's all directed at women, and so childcare, domestic management, all of these things, violence, household issues are completely left outside these programs. And we found men who wanted to be involved in these discussions, who wanted to go to some of these meetings, who wanted to discuss questions about even domestic violence, but they just simply weren't being invited to. So that's a terribly simple thing to do, and actually it doesn't cost anything. So again, you know, some of the more ambitious things one could talk about may be more difficult to fund, but there are just ways of thinking creatively about how to get these programs more gender sensitive and building on those things. So those are just a few of the things.
Great, thanks.
This is just to comment on something that's sort of been said by most people, but maybe just highlighting, which is in the US, with the US government in particular, there is now a really strong emphasis on the role of evidence in any kind of policy direction. And I think I'm sure that's the case here as well, but I think that's something that's really important to monitor when we're talking about the beginning of a process like the UN Women, because when this question of evidence comes up, you know, now the focus is on randomized control trials and very high levels of evidence. With a lot of the kinds of endeavor we're talking about, you cannot have that level of evidence, or you cannot be that rigid about what the nature of evidence is. And I think it's really useful to think about what they are, you know, not just indicators, but what is the what and how. And I think the investment has to begin at the beginning, not be an afterthought, because we've done these evaluations, you know, when programs have been in place, and it's very hard to be convincing about what works and what doesn't if you haven't thought it through from the beginning.
Okay, thanks a lot. I'll open up again now for another round of questions. Yes.
Hi, I'm Emily Ashton from One World Action. Thank you very much for all the panelists for very engaging presentations. I just want to pick up on something that came out of Maxine's discussion of the condition of cash transfer, particularly your point about how the programme very much treated women as the means to fulfil programme goals. And it seems to me that that was at the root of some of the things that were wrong about that programme.
And I feel like it's part of a broader problem that we're seeing increasingly at the moment, where women are incorporated into development, but only in very instrumental ways, only because of the efficiency, because of their multiplier effect. So my question really is, as we look forward to sort of the future of gender and development, to all the panellists, do you think it matters if women are a priority, but only because of their multiplier effects, because of value for money argument? And if it does matter, what kind of responses do we need so that we can start to change the discourse and bring in arguments again about justice and rights and well-being?
Thank you. Yes.
Thank you. Elsa Dawson, independent consultant. I just want to say that it's fantastic to hear about UN Women and their plans, and I think we have such great opportunity now to work with the UN system on gender equality. And I think it's really important that we use this opportunity to see how we can leverage all the funds of the UN in favour of women's rights and gender equality. I note with great interest that there is the plan to support the UN system with greater coherence in terms of gender equality in certain areas. But I think that this, especially the new political power that was described in that the UN Women will have a place on the UN board, should be used to look at generally how gender can be mainstreamed across all of the UN's work. And I'm particularly concerned, I didn't hear anything about governance and economic development, and I think Maxine's work shows yet again how important it is to mainstream gender equality in those areas.
Thank you. Other questions? Not at all. Okay, we'll take these two, and then maybe it'll give you a chance to think of some more. Do you have any reflections, Sahida? No? Okay, Maxine.
This question has been, as you know, around a very long time about instrumentalising women into development, and it goes right back to the days of Esther Boserup's pioneering work. But I think that we're some tools at our disposal, including the rights-based agenda, And the fact that it is understood more broadly that rights are an integral part of pursuing a kind of development strategy that is going to deliver on a number of things, that's possibly the way to to make sure that women are treated as more than simply the levers to access other goals. In other words, women's rights are essential to these agendas and must be seen to be incorporated into development strategies, and that has to happen through government, through lobbying, through again making development accountable to what's been signed up to. And where these governments have signed up to women's empowerment and rights and so forth, those are the instruments that can be levered and must be worked with, and that's why the agents who work with those things, such as women's rights movements and lawyers and all the rest of it, are our allies in that process.
Nisreen, do you want to add anything to these questions?
Yes, just on the key priorities of UN Women, definitely economic empowerment is one of the 5 priorities that we have identified, and I have mentioned, and this is a core dimension of looking at women's empowerment and achieving gender equality. The second element on governance, I think, in how we have defined the current priorities of looking at women's political participation and leadership, and looking at national planning and budgeting systems, touch upon 2 key elements of governance. So, of course, there is much more complex and broader dimensions, and we are in the process of really articulating our input and contribution in this regard. And just I wanted to comment on the point regarding evidence and the importance of that within the thinking and the planning for UN Women. One of the main sources that we are looking at this point that to inform our work is an assessment that we did of UNIFEM's last strategic plan, and really identifying what were the shortcomings and what were the strengths within that, and how can it help us develop a more robust strategic plan that allows us to assess and track our progress as an organization. But also, one of the key functions that we will look into developing within UN Women is this being this global knowledge leader of what is the successful strategies and approaches towards gender equality. Not generating it ourselves, but there is plenty of work that we know exists that is supported by evidence. Just to mention the work of Maxine on social protection programs and the work that you are doing on social protection. We know what works. We know where are the gaps. But this continues to be sometimes elusive in designing social protection programs over and over. And this is what we see at country level. In every country, we start engaging with social protection programs in the design. The same elements are forgotten and ignored at the beginning, and it's through this extensive advocacy and effort and technical support that you are able to ensure that what we've learned, what we know from so many places, needs to be integrated, and this is the kind of evidence that we need to make sure is available and accessible to all policymakers as well as gender equality advocates. So we're very aware of this, and hopefully we will able to set up the mechanisms and the systems that will allow us to become that kind of resource to different development actors.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I was just thinking about the last General Assembly of the UN, where the major focus of many of the member states was on MDG5, on maternal mortality. Quite right. However, I mean, the reality, of course, is that if women continue to have low status and low value and little respect, then saving those lives is going to be difficult to manage. It needs a much broader, wider understanding of the kind of issues on social protection, on what real development means for women. So, I mean, these are very complex issues. But I do think that we do have, I hate the words, but I mean, it is a kind of roadmap we have now. I mean, I've followed these issues for so long. I mean, I do have a sense now that we're beginning to map out what we have to do, and I think it's in no small measure due to the efforts that have gone into establishing UN Women, because that gives us, you know, for the first time, not enough resources, but at least some resources and some real focus on what needs to be done. Human rights, women's rights, equity, whatever we call it, are, I think, deliverable. They have to be. But there are difficult journeys that we have to take. But you know, Emily talked about it's not just about value for money, and that's absolutely right. But saving lives is value for money, and getting girls into schools is value for money, and we have to prove that is the case. I don't have a problem with that. I think it's a very important point that we make, and access to income. That's what gives women independence, gives them the right to make choices. And as women, that's really what sometimes the frustration you hear about from women, where they're excluded and not part of the general drive of political space, whatever it is that they're seeking to join. So, I mean, I think we do have to leave today's meeting feeling optimistic and feeling that we have to get behind what UN Women are doing, and all of us make whatever contribution we can to ensuring that it works and it gets the financial and other support that it needs.
Thank you very much. Any remaining burning questions? There are. Okay. Just a couple more. Sure. Yes, please.
Hi, my name is Tracy Irvin from the Science and Development Network, and we are an international science news agency. But my question is more broadly on the communication role of some of the messages that we've been hearing about social empowerment and sort of economic development, political development. A lot of work is being done by all of the organisations in this room, but very little I can see is going out into the international communication networks, both in the evidence base of, you know, women's empowerment, but also more broadly speaking of changing sort of mass population views on the role of women and equality of women. And I would like to ask the panel, you know, where communications fit in across all of these, across the whole gender mainstreaming role, really.
Thank you. The gentleman in the middle, please.
Thank you. My name is Nzita. I'm an economist, but I'm not working for the time being. So now my question here really is to Nasrin in UN, and with regard to first to DRC. So the UN last summer published a report, mapping a report on the DRC. In that report, the government of Rwanda, Uganda, and Angola were singled out that they did commit massive violation of women's rights. They abused women, Congolese women in DRC. Since then, not a single official from Rwanda, Uganda, and Angola has been arrested. Some of them even are flying to Congo. So what the UN woman is going to do about it, really, if that organization is to be taken seriously, I think she should do something about it. So my second question is about what you said here, but I think it's a bit missing. What are you going to do? What gender equality and establish religion? Whether Hinduism, whether Islam, whether Christianity, whether Judaism, there are some really practices in those religions which promote gender inequality. And my last question is in regard
we could just
to...
leave it there, sorry, just one question each, because we're running short of time. Okay, and we'll take the final question here, thanks.
Hello?
This is working.
If you can just speak really loudly, thanks.
My question is for Nazreen. Can you speak into the microphone?
It's not working.
Okay.
But I would appreciate it.
Sure.
Speak louder.
Sure. My question is for Nazreen. I was just wondering if she could comment on the role of women in agriculture and food security and where it fits within UN Women's priorities.
Great, thank you. If we could just ask the panel to comment briefly, because we're very close to end of time. Nazreen, were you able to hear all the questions, or do you need them repeated?
I sort of understood. I think there was a question about the RC and what the UN Women is doing about that, and a question about UN Women and agriculture and peace and security. Is that correct?
Food security. Yes, and there was also a question about
food security.
Yeah.
Food security. There was a question about links between gender equality and established religion that might not be advancing gender equality or actually perpetuating inequalities. And then the first question was related to international communication of some of the evidence base around what works in terms of promoting women and girls' empowerment. So just if you can select a couple of those points.
I mean, in terms of international communication, definitely this is one of the things we need to be working on. I will not comment on this at this point, but hopefully this is something we can deliver on. On agriculture and food security, just to flag that next year the Commission on the Status of Women will be focused on rural women and agriculture. So we hope to see much more focused work within the coming year in preparation for that. On the RC, if I heard correctly, I think no one will disagree that what is happening in the RC, especially to women, is something really serious, and the response has not been adequate from all across. And this is an example of the kinds of issues that we hope having Madame Bachelet having the direct access to the Secretary General will help really mobilizing the UN system to have a more effective response. I will make sure to communicate this to colleagues, but I won't be able to say more on this right now because I'm not aware of specific action, but I can get back to you if you would like to contact me around this. Around the role of religion, definitely this is an important issue that that becomes more relevant to us in this day and age, but also trying to deal with it in more intelligent ways, let's say, and see what can be done in order to ensure that women's rights are protected within growing influence of religion, and any definition of women's rights that does not take into consideration the impact of religion is is going to always fall short in a way. There are positive elements that we can capitalize on, but of course there is a lot of radical interpretations that have played a very negative role with regard to women's rights. This is a challenge for all of us working on issues on human rights, and I don't have an intelligent response at this point, but other than to say this needs a much more focused attention and building alliances as well with more enlightened interpretations. The main point is how to ensure a rule of law that really responds and protects women's rights, regardless on what kind of religious context that we are talking about.
Thank you. That's good.
Yeah, on Tracy's question, I mean, I probably could easily describe myself as a good old-fashioned 1970s feminist, and I think it's about time we really were not strident, because that perhaps is counterproductive, but it's about time that we were far more upfront about our views. When you think, I mean, I was listening to Hillary Clinton the other day on a news program, and I mean, she is a game changer, because she's the first one of her stature, her status in US government or almost anywhere, who is prepared to say what she's saying. And she goes to the General Assembly and makes a great speech, and they comment on her hair clips and that kind of thing. You know, I mean, if you Google that, you get about 1,000 hits about hair clips and nothing about what she was talking about, which was about women's rights. So we do have a huge set of challenges, but that doesn't mean that we have to back off. I think we have to be much more upfront. We have to be not afraid of saying things as they are and telling people what the realities are. And you're absolutely right on communication. We have to be better at it. On DRC, of course, the big role that the UN has now is the role of Margaret Wallström, who is the Secretary General Special Representative on these issues, and she is doing a terrific job. She's been to the Congo many times. She just was in Liberia. She came to speak to the UN group in the Parliament a few weeks ago, and she is doing a really wonderful job. She was a commissioner in the European Commission for many years, and is now working very hard on these issues. So if there's anyone you really need to contact on what the UN is doing on 1325 and on violence in Congo and dealing with the various countries, she is being very outspoken and very, very clear on the fundamentals that need to be addressed. So I would suggest that maybe we focused on her. And on food security, a hugely important issue, and we can talk about, of course, the importance of women as farmers, because I often in a meeting ask people to close their eyes and imagine a farmer, and about 99% of people will imagine a man, whereas most of the world's food is produced by women in very, very difficult circumstances. And on food security and food prices, I actually think it's about time we started saying that we need to regulate commodity markets to make it possible for people to produce food and have a fair price for what they produce and what they have access to. And quickly on religion, what they do, as they're doing in Khartoum, is they're redefining their religion in order to make it suit their agenda, which is to repress women. You know, that's the intention of all of this. It's not their particular, it's not in the Quran or in the Bible or anything that you do these things, but they do it because they use it as a way of oppressing women, and that again is something that we have to communicate much more forcibly than perhaps we've been prepared to do in the past.
I'm sorry.
The name. Yeah, I'll write it down for you.
Well, very quickly, as we're running out of time, just a couple of points on one of the issues, communication. One is, I entirely agree with what's just been said of the need to stand up and get things said, but also this question of gathering evidence together, because if it's true, as Nisreen hinted, and I hope it is, Nisreen, that UN Women might be able to take this forward and provide a portal where we could access, cutting-edge research and be able to, access access the evidence base that's out there, that would be absolutely fantastic. It's really necessary, and also we know that there's such little money going into these things in terms of, for example, maintaining archives of feminist work and all the rest of it. You know, again, there's a budget issue, but there's a lot that can be done if we just collaborate on this and work together to make these, fill these gaps.
So I want to make a plug for thinking about gender in life cycle terms as a communication strategy, because I think one of the frustrations about talking about women's issue is, we've talked about this before, there are loads of problems, what are we going to do about it? I think our reason for focusing on girls and adolescents isn't just that we're advocating for a small interest group and a subset of the bigger, but it's to say that if you want to make a difference, and if you want to bring a positive message, this is where your investments can pay off. So, and I think then we say gender or women and we forget that that includes girls. So just to make a plug for not just to say women and girls, but to recognize that this is where you can make investments that can have a big payoff.
And thank you very much. Well, thank you very much to everyone for a really stimulating conversation. I'm going to hand over to Caroline for the final word for today.
Okay, thank you. I'm not going to keep you more than a couple of minutes, 1 minute maybe. Thank you very much for your endurance to stay for so long. ODI meetings are usually much shorter because we realise there's a limited attention span, but we thought this issue merited a long discussion, so we really appreciate it. And I very much appreciate the contribution from the panel. I think it's been extraordinarily high level and very informative for us all. I did want to draw attention to just one other flyer that we've got. I do think when we work on issues of gender, we need to focus on all age groups, and I feel that very strongly. I do think there is an issue around young people, though, as the future. And I recently was at a conference on poverty in the UK and listening to youth workers working with children. And they said, if I have a child of 12, I can change their life around. But if a child comes to me by the time they're 14, it's just too late. And I can't do anything with them. And I do think that we need to think about the future and invest much more heavily in adolescents and young people than we currently do, because actually it is neglected in the area of gender. I wanted to draw your attention to this slide. We've just done a systematic review of evidence of what works. And I would like to leave you with the idea that change is happening, that change is possible, and that we are making progress, because I think that is the case, although there remains a lot more to be done. So please join me in thanking the panel for their contributions and thanking all of you for your time as well.
Thank you. We didn't get one of the